Let's go, people, let's go. It's Prognosis negative time.
Hi, this is Eric.
And this is Caleb.
And welcome back to this Prognosis Negative, episode 42. Nothing special about that number at all. But we are back with perhaps, I think, one of the most unusual selections we've had on the podcast. At least that's how it seems to me at this point. Before we get into it, don't forget the other podcasts we produce here. Romulans Bearing Gifts for everything Star Trek. Mostly Harmless Cutaway for your Doctor Who fix. Of course, I'm also always doing new episodes of Best Picture Podcast with Sean. All this stuff is on all the usual pod feeds. Of course, Caleb is on the Novice Elitist. So, yeah, give things a listen if you care to hear more of our voices. But we are here to talk about Pit Stop.
The most dangerous game ever devised to pit man against man, flesh against steel. The figure eight race.
Now, hey, look out! Look out! Look out! Fighting down for the lead.
You know why I'm the winner? Because I'm the dingiest there is. So when they see me coming through that intersection, they just naturally back off. Because they know I ain't gonna stop for nobody. So when you see me coming, you best get out the way.
Pit Stop. The fantastic story of the men who pit their flesh against the shrieking of tires and the grinding of steel. And the women who share the thrill of danger with their own flesh in their own way. Pit Stop. Starring Brian Donlevy, Dick Davalos, Ellen McRae, Sid Haig, and Beverly Washburn.
He's fighting with the Ringo. Hold it. Come on!
Never seen a motion picture like this before. Can you take it?
Released in 1969, though produced in 1967. Or is it called The Winner?
Yeah, always a question.
As the title card notes. All right. I know I didn't pick this one. And obviously one of my first questions is to Caleb. What the heck is going on? How did this come up on your list of lists?
Yeah, well, I'll say to start this, the reason I suggested it today is because it came off of the same list that I suggested Journey to Italy from, my movies I like but don't hear mentioned very much. And the reason I saw this is because back in 2020 I was doing one of my director retrospectives where I just pick a filmmaker and go through their whole filmography. And that year one of the filmmakers I picked at least was Jack Hill, one of the most famous exploitation filmmakers. And this was, I think, maybe his third film, or at least the second that he was only just him credited for. He did a couple that he was just kind of brought onto a job late in the production, but this was, one of his bigger breaks. And this is probably his first professional film. His first one, Spider Baby, was much more loose and much more low budget. This one's a little bit more polished.
Okay, I see Jack Hill has Coffee and Foxy Brown in his filmography. Okay, I'm aware of those movies. I think I may have seen both of them, actually. And
Yeah, The Big Dollhouse, one of the more famous of the women in prison flicks.
definitely haven't seen nor have I heard. Sorceress, not sure.
Oof, and you don't need to. That one's reasonably forgotten.
It's just there's so many of those types of movies that came out around that time. It's hard for me to know which ones I've seen and which ones I haven't.
That's fair.
But is Pit Stop, when people regard his entire filmography, is it considered one of his best?
No, and that's why I added to this list, because when it comes to Jack Hill,
Oh, it's not.
he's famous for Spider Baby or The Maddest Story Ever Told. That's one that has a lot of underground appeal for the horror community. And then his blaxploitation stuff is, of course, got its spot in the spotlight. And even Switchblade Sisters, kind of a later exploitation film, has its own big cult community. But Pit Stop it's always kind of fallen through the cracks when it comes to Jack Hill. And I think for a long time it wasn't really available, and that's one of the reasons that it doesn't have as much of a spotlight. So yeah, that's why I brought it on this list, because I feel like it's one that doesn't get talked about as much as it should.
Okay. Well, woo-hoo. All right. I could tell. Okay, I never heard of it. I did not know Jack Hill by his name, even though I'd seen a couple of his movies at the least. When I started this movie, I obviously could tell had something to do with racing, and my initial thoughts were, "Oh, look at this!" I mean, especially the opening scene. I was like, "Oh, this is kind of like American Graffiti," and I was thinking, it's funny how American Graffiti gets so much notoriety as dipping back into like 50s car culture when when did that one come out? 73, 74?
I think so, something like that.
And it's like, oh, look at this throwback to the 50s and dragsters and drag racing and yada yada yada. And here I'm like, well, this movie just came out in 69 and it's starting off with the exact same vibe. And I thought it was kind of weird. Now, okay, I realize now that it was produced in 67, but when I'm first watching it, I'm thinking this is 69. And I thought it was like kind of weird that it had that 50s vibe, even though it's clearly a late 60s movie. And that just seems kind of like a weird thing to do in the midst of what was happening with culture at the time. Like everything was radically changing in the late 60s, culturally speaking, and with fashion and style and everything. And it seemed weird to start off this movie in such a throwback kind of way. And even our hero or protagonist, Rick, he has like the stereotypical 50s greaser hairstyle, and that would have been really weird and out of place in 1969. So I didn't even know what to make of this. Like, I don't know. It was I mean, at the start, it was just so weird. And I will say that, like, the two cars that race right in the opening of the film,
Mm-hmm.
those are some pretty cool looking hot rods. The owner, or I don't know what you want to call him, the guy who finances a lot of these drivers, Mr. Willard, his car is like some weird customized, I don't know if it's an Oldsmobile or what it is, but it's I believe it's some type of customized sedan.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting. And I will say that it seems like a relatively grounded, serious drama for approximately the first third of the movie, I would say.
Then you feel like it changes gears?
Yes. Pun intended. Yes.
Pun intended, yes.
But it was the movie came across to me as a lot more intriguing at the onset.
Yeah, and what do you think of the do you mean it becomes more absurd when we start to see the figure eight racing stuff?
It's absurd is not exactly the word I would use, but I feel like artistically it loses focus around that time in the movie.
Yeah, I guess I don't know. I guess I can kind of see what you mean, but I guess we'll dive into it more as we go through. But just to his the lead's kind of more 50s style, I wondered if that was meant to be kind of a throwback guy, because we haven't quite gotten to the era of like the more sensitive. I mean, I think it was starting to kick around in the late 60s, but I don't know about 67. But like we get a lot of those more softer, in touch with their emotions leading men in the 70s. So I thought him feeling like this throwback to the 60s was kind of an intentional reference.
Or you mean throwback to the 50s?
Just in terms of Rick's kind of style, with his greaser hair and his outfit. I thought they were kind of giving us like an older school of leading man where they don't have their emotions on their chest and they're kind of have that like hard edge to them.
Well, yeah. And I mentioned to you offline before that not too long ago I was going through the Billy Jack filmography, and Billy Jack as the protagonist in that series, aside from his Native American accoutrement, underneath that or on top of that, he has a similar persona as this guy. He has a throwback hairstyle. He wears like the jean jacket, and you can tell that Billy Jack's character, partly by design, this is so weird because he's meant to be like a more traditional kind of guy, Billy Jack, like not with. He's like a traditional conservative in the sense of I don't change with the times. I stay grounded with the past. Yet, that being said, that character has this weird progressive mind on top at the same time. Because he is down with like civil rights and acceptance of others. So it's weird. He's like traditional mores combined with progressive sensibilities. But that's Billy Jack. But I'm just saying though, but aesthetically, it's sort of the same setup as this protagonist. Is I'm just kind of a guy who I just do my thing. Like I've always done my thing. I don't follow trends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I get the sense that, I mean, of course they never go into it, but he has a pretty rough background. He doesn't have much money. It doesn't seem like maybe his only passion, his only way to prove that he's something is this racing. And it was kind of reminding me a little bit, because me and Isaac have been rewatching the Fast and the Furious stuff. It was making me think a lot about those movies, and I kind of think it's, or I should say, I think it's kind of a fun look at the car culture of this era.
Well, yeah, and again, for the first third of the movie, in my mind, I was thinking, oh, this is Fast and the Furious 1969. I was getting a lot of those vibes. And then, who knows, maybe in the latter 2/3, it became the 60s version of the mindless Fast and the Furious movies.
Oh, I definitely don't think it gets mindless, but yeah, I guess we'll get into that. Which, by the way, if you are looking for a more mindless, I believe it was the 50s, the original Fast and Furious, also produced by Roger Corman, like this movie was. Much, much worse. That original Fast and Furious, just a very weak film.
Oh, there's actually one called Fast and the Furious from the 50s?
Yes, yeah, they borrowed that title when they made the 2001 one.
I was not aware of that.
Yeah, and some plot elements too they borrowed, even though it's not an actual remake. They just, yeah.
Right.
But not a very good film. But I did want to discuss a little bit of the figure eight stuff, because I was curious what you were going to think of that, because we get so much footage, and a lot of it I found difficult to tell whose car was whose. I was like, which one's Rick? Which one's the Hawk? Occasionally they would say in the commentary, like, oh, look out for car 198. I was like, okay, thank you. Now I can keep an eye out. But
so it's funny you should bring up the figure eight business, because when we start seeing that racing go down, it's around when the movie starts making a turn, and it doesn't fully make the turn for me until a little bit later after that, but that was the beginning of the turn. And so, Rick builds this sort of business relationship with Willard, Mr. Willard, who's sort of, like I said, he sponsors racers to get into these races, and he has like multiple racers who he finances, and when his guys do good, he always gets something out of it. I mean, financially. And so Rick is this like cocky driver guy, and they see this figure eight. So the course, rather than being a traditional oval, it's literally a figure eight, which means that cars have to cross in the center, which makes for, more opportunity for crashes and things like that. And yeah, when it gets to that scene or the scenes of the figure eight racing, man, it really just comes across as a bunch of stock footage, sort of like haphazardly pieced together.
Mm-hmm.
And that was an aspect I really did not like at all. And if you did know what their individual cars look like, yes, you would see the cars were in there amongst the chaos and everything. Mm-hmm. But you don't get any overall sense of, what lap are they on, who's in first, it's such a jumble of footage. And I really did not like that aspect that the cutting was so disorganized. And like you just see like a bunch of random cars driving by, random cars, and then it would promote, oh, so and so's coming on so and so, and that was like a thing to follow for a few frames, and then it was just random footage. Oh man,
yeah,
not good.
I did wonder what you were going to think about that, because I can appreciate the brutality of it. Like, it's such an insane kind of I can't even call it I mean, I guess it's a sport in a way, but it seems more like a celebration of chaos. And Jack Hill, he felt the same way. When Roger Corman approached him about making a car movie, he was like, I'm not interested in this stuff. It's just, boring racing. I don't care about that kind of mindless stuff. And it wasn't until he discovered this figure eight racing that he was like, oh, I can find something in this chaos. And I don't know if he necessarily did, but it is an interesting thing to put a spotlight on, because all that stuff that he shot was real footage that they just pieced together. They just picked numbers and like, okay, that's going to be our lead here. And it was, all that stuff was just real crashes of all these unfortunate souls.
No, but
there and there.
When I was younger, I was taken to races like these, like in real life.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like similar size track. Now, none of this figure eight business. It was a regular, make like regular circuit type deal. But the cars were like the same kind of quality of cars. It was expected that cars are going to crash and get junked up, and they did, like during the races.
Mm-hmm.
And it was fun. All right, whatever. But the thing is, it's so like Bush League. I mean, it's one thing. It's one thing if somebody told me, oh no, that's not a good comparison. Well, let's just say there's a big difference between actually going to see WWE and then just seeing like the local professional wrestling that's going to be done at the YMCA. You know what I mean? And not to disrespect anybody who does like the amateur stuff, because in my head I can totally understand the appeal of the small time stuff. I totally get it. It's just, though, the stakes are totally different. Or, I mean, even as an audience person, you have to, even if you're a fan of both the local wrestling scene and the mainstream, you're still going to feel a lot different, like being involved in the drama and the action, if you're actually at a WWE event versus like something small scale. And this is small scale racing, and that's what was weird to me, because I haven't seen it in a million years, but I thought Days of Thunder was a pretty cool, interesting movie at the time, the Tom Cruise vehicle. And I don't know if you've seen Ford v Ferrari.
No, I missed that one.
But that's a really good effort, really strong effort. By the way, that director who did that movie is one of the directors for the upcoming 3 Star Wars movies that they announced recently.
Oh, James Mangold?
Yes. But he made that movie. He seems to be a really good filmmaker. I will say that in general, based on Ford v Ferrari and some of his other stuff. It's definitely a well-made movie. But where that movie excels is that whenever there is a racing scene, you can 100% follow exactly what you're supposed to be following in terms of the race itself. Anyway, so for this movie, I've been to these kind of races before, this scale, and they're really fun, but it seems weird to take the drama seriously about who the winner is and who's the number one guy, because there's no sense of stakes of, oh, if you win this race, you'll go to like the regionals or something, or work your way up to it's.
Well, that is what happens.
Well, yeah, it is. Sort of, but see, I was kind of checked out by the time we get to that part of the movie. But it was weird. It was weird, and yeah, I don't like the excessive use of the footage that doesn't tell a story in the editing.
Yeah.
Except for the main parts, but other than that, it's just like a whole bunch of footage. And even though, yeah, I think they really did shoot this stuff specifically for the movie, it's a failure that it feels like stock footage, even though it's...
Oh, no, they didn't.
They didn't?
No, they didn't shoot any footage for the movie.
No, hold on.
Or, I mean, they did, but it wasn't like they were directing anything. They just went to races for like 6 weeks.
Oh, yeah. But what I'm saying is they filmed it specifically for this movie. But it comes across as they just went to a big vault of extra footage and just like found somebody else's work. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And it would have been hard for them because they were shooting, I think it was 6 weeks, and they would just shoot race after race. And they just had all this footage to try to piece together to create some story with the racing.
But see, I was trying to figure out during the movie if this stuff was even shot specifically for the movie or if it was just taken from something else, because I know especially, and you said this was produced by Corman?
Yeah.
Roger Corman?
Financed, not technically produced.
Okay, because I didn't know he had any involvement. But I know with a lot of his stuff, you know, he would just buy some other cheap movie or some European movie and then just completely recut it and then film his own scenes. Like, in other words, do a poor version of like the American Godzilla, the original.
Yes.
The Americanized version of Godzilla. So I was wondering if that was even happening here, if this was just random racing footage that somebody else shot for a documentary or something, and then they just got it and then crafted it into a movie. I was trying to figure that out, and the only time I doubted it, that's what they did, was because at one point, Hawk gets like this really nice brand new car, which, did they even explain how he gets that car?
I think it was just like a sponsorship thing.
Because he just shows up with this like really nice car. And then I kept looking for it in the racing footage, and then you can actually see that car is.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, okay. Well,
yeah.
Okay, I guess.
They said that they, after they were done shooting and they'd put together the kind of races and picked who they were going to be, then they just bought cars and replicated the ones for the, so they could show shots of them standing by them or that kind of thing.
So I kind of thought that too. But anyway, yeah, so the movie just, I don't know. So it made it hard to connect to the racing scenes, the actual racing scenes. What do you want to talk about next? Because I don't know. There are other things to talk about. I just don't even know how to switch subjects on this movie.
Sure. Well, since we brought up Roger Corman, I will say, and I think this is crazy that I've done, I don't know how many movie podcasts at this point. And this is the first time I'm finally covering a movie that was in some way produced by Roger Corman, even though his name isn't on it, even though he was just a money man in the background. Yeah, 'cause I'm such a fan of this guy's work. So
yeah, I think we've done a Corman film on Prognosis Negative already before. Is Star Crash a Corman film?
It's Italian. I don't know if he was involved with distribution, but I don't think he would have been involved with producing.
I thought it was a Corman production.
It may have been picked up by American International Pictures, but I don't know if he was still involved with them when they released that. I think they released that, but I might be wrong.
That was New World Pictures in the United States.
Oh, yeah, New World. That was Roger Corman distributing.
Okay. I don't know why I don't see his name on the credits.
Yeah, does it have a production studio that made it? Or is that New World?
In Italy, it was Fida Cinematografica, and it just says New World Pictures US.
Oh, yeah. For distribution. Yeah, Film Enterprise Productions and Bandcom Autovision Corporation produced. I don't think either one of those were involved with Corman. But yeah, New World was his studio. But no, that's cool. Yeah, there you go. And so yeah, no, I'm excited to finally talk about Corman. Yeah, and this is one of his better efforts in terms of things he's produced. If you've
Oh my god!
seen many of his work, but
Oh my god!
but another direction I was going to switch to is Sid Haig, one of Jack Hill's regular actors. He features him in almost every one of his films, and he was a massive exploitation presence overall. He shows up all over the place as a heavy, playing Hawk this time. Yeah, I'm curious what you think of him, because I've always been a big fan of Sid Haig.
Okay, so I didn't realize till we had already hit record on this podcast who he was, because I was just setting up my fake notes for the podcast, and when I saw a more recent picture of him, the actor Sid Haig, oh, I totally recognize that guy. And yeah, I've seen him in some 70s movies, and I know he's been in newer movies. I just haven't really seen any of the newer movies. But he has such a recognizable face. That being said, I had no idea that was the same guy playing Hawk in this movie, because he's so much younger looking, and so yeah, I didn't even realize it was the same guy. But as far as him in the movie, he is this weird, over-the-top cornball. He's a completely nutty character. He seemed like he'd be like some crazy guest character on a Scooby-Doo cartoon from the original Run or something. Like he's just out of this world. Like all the other characters in the movie are relatively grounded or like real people, and then Hawk is just this. Man, he's like mental. He's on drugs or something. He lives in a dreamland, or he's like an out of universe character. And I don't mean that bad. I'm not saying bad.
Oh wow, no, I did not see it that way at all. Not even.
He's nuts. He's completely nuts. And where I first knew he was nuts, because his character's introduced as this overly cocky.
Yeah,
like
flamboyant,
whatever. But like when he wins the first race that Rick is like in the audience for, he comes up and he gets out of his car, and then they're taking pictures of him. He's waving at the crowd, and there's the girl in the bikini.
Oh man,
who he like kisses twice, and then she looks like after he kisses her 2 times, it looks like she's standing there waiting for a third time. Until some guy ushers her away, almost as if no, like we're good, we don't need to kiss him again. But that was the beginning of me like going, what in the world is happening with this character? But I will say I started watching the movie a second time today, and I didn't have much reaction at all the first time I watched it. I mean, personally, like I'm just sitting there in silence watching the movie, but I actually kind of chuckled or laughed out loud the second time I was watching it. There's this part, I think it might be the first time Rick won a race, perhaps, and it's the first time that the character Jolene kind of like makes eyes at Rick. Like I said, I think it's when he first wins or something. And she's kind of like giving him eyes. Jolene is. And Jolene was sort of like Hawk's girl, sort of, up to this point in the movie. And so Rick is just there like smiling or celebrating or whatever. And Hawk has gone off screen, but you can hear the audio off screen. And there's another male character off screen who says, and the volume's a little bit down, so you have to a little bit pay attention to hear this. But a voice without a face says, watch out, Rick is gonna steal your girl. And then you can hear Hawk also off screen go, oh Lord, have mercy.
Yeah.
And
I did.
It was really funny. And it was weird because it was such an off-screen joke, you know what I mean? You could just completely miss it. And even though I can't see Hawk, I could just picture him like, oh, I'm shaking in my boots. Like, I don't know, that was weirdly funny. So I'll give them that.
Yeah, and I really like his hawk. This is a very some of it feels like the usual Sid Haig stuff, especially that scene where he shows up after Rick beats him and he completely destroys his car, just beats the hell out of him. That felt very typical of some of his darker exploitation roles. But his like overly flamboyant side I think is fun. And I like his little bit of a turn. I don't fully feel like it makes somewhat it makes sense, but when he like apologized, I think that's a nice scene. When he offers to buy him a beer, I think he played that well.
It sort of makes sense, but they should have developed it at least a little bit more in the movie, like to understand and explain it.
Yeah, and there's a part of the movie that feels like, it wasn't quite developed enough, but I feel like it is in there. Of Rick has his mask that he's always wearing, and the mask is that he doesn't really know how to connect with other people, and so he puts up this front like he doesn't care. And there's only like one scene where we get that kind of broken down, or maybe two scenes actually. And then I think for Hawk, I think he just has inferiority complex a little bit or something. And so once he is like beaten and put in his place, he snaps and he discovers this part of himself that he didn't know was there, with him fucking up that car and completely beating up Rick. And then after that, like his mask is kind of taken off and he realizes, oh, like, yeah, maybe this guy is better than me and maybe I don't have to be this beast anymore. Again, some of this is, I feel like, just, it's not fully there, but I could see a little bit more in the second viewing.
And I don't want to jump to something that kind of spoils the end of the movie right now, but what's with Chekhov's medical advice?
Chekhov's medical advice, like the doctor, or what do you mean?
Yeah, and I don't know if it's I'm not even sure if it's the same doctor, but it seems really weird around midpoint in the movie, almost exactly midpoint in the movie. And this is where Rick has been patched up in the hospital, I believe.
Yeah.
And the doctor's just giving him real specific advice about what to do and how nobody ever listens to their advice. And it seems really weird that we're having all this focus on the doctor's instructions and recommendations. But it seems to serve no purpose until the end of the movie. And so that's why I'm calling it Chekhov's medical advice, because it just weirdly stands out in the middle of the movie and then suddenly becomes relevant at the very end, indirectly.
Well, Rick gets a lot of advice. Like, we also have that, a junkyard owner?
Yeah.
Who's advising him, like, oh, don't trust Willard. I see, every other month there's a guy like you showing up here. And
oh, yeah, but
next thing you know, they walk away getting all beaten.
No, but that's all in context, though. Yeah, he does get advice from, like, the junkyard guy. He gets advice from the old-time driver, retired driver. No, that's all, like, in context in the movie. But when he gets the doctor's advice, it's almost like it's the equivalent of having, like, a commercial in the middle of the movie. And I mean that as a metaphor, not literally a commercial, but almost as if, and take 2 of these and you'll feel great. These have a winter fresh taste that really goes down well. That's not what happens literally in the movie, but it feels like that's what's happening because it's this weird out of place exposition on doctorly advice, as opposed to that other advice that Rick was receiving, which actually felt like it was in the movie. This felt like almost like a paid spot by the Surgeons Association of America. And I was like, that's so weird. Why is this so weird? But then, like I said, you get to the end of the movie and you go, oh, okay.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. Yeah, I guess it maybe was exposition for that. Yeah.
I was like, this is so weird. I mean, this is obviously intentional for that reason, but it's so clunky.
Yeah, I guess I could see that. Yeah. I was more focused on Rick just completely ignoring it just so that he can go back to his plot is racing. Doesn't care about his health or anything, which I guess is also set up. Yeah.
That's the problem. No one ever follows our advice.
Yeah, they say dingy. That's their catchphrase for crazy. All these races are dingy. Oh, but I also want to mention, since we haven't talked about Brian Donlevy playing Willard, did you recognize this guy at all?
he seemed so familiar, and he reminded me of other actors and other things, but no, I couldn't really place him.
Oh yeah, I was super pumped to see this guy. I mainly know him from the Hammer version of Quatermass, the Quatermass Experiment. Plays Professor Quatermass in that. He's just great, and he shows up in the third Fly film in another very memorable role. Even though that film sucks, the third Fly film, Curse the Fly, but he's good in it. So I was happy to see him here. I think he brings a solid presence.
He's an actor who there's just actors that look like him, like from his generation of when he was an actor. Like he just like there's certain actors who are interchangeable for certain roles, and he's like an interchangeable actor for this type of role.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I just can't think of him.
Do you know what I'm saying?
No.
Like if you have like the aloof leading man, you could plug in Rick here, not Rick, but you can plug in Richard Davalos. You could plug in someone, or like how like how they cast Captain Kirk for the original series. They had the actor who played Pike, and then they had William Shatner, obviously. And even though they're two different people, you can just tell that they have the look that this person can be plugged in as leading man.
Mm-hmm.
And Brian Dunleavy has this, like, because of his little, I don't know what you call that kind of mustache. But it's kind of like Clark Gable, but if Clark Gable was like in his 60s kind of look with the mustache. There's a bunch of random actors who just had that look in these days, like in the 50s and the 60s, and they just kind of have this similar look, and I feel like you could just swap them all around with each other.
Yeah, it could be.
I guess they're character actors, I guess, in a way, is what I'm saying. Character
actors. Yeah, but I like seeing him here. Apparently they only had him for a few days, and I think you can kind of tell, but I appreciate him showing up here either way. He's a little bit of a stalwart of the time.
I mean, he's fine. He plays his purpose in the movie.
Yeah, what'd you think of Jolene?
I thought she was Dodo.
Yeah, I was thinking of Dodo as well. Yeah.
But then I realized she too was in the original series.
Yes.
And I can't say everything I want to say because I'll get canceled.
Oh no.
In 2023. If we were doing this podcast perhaps 5 years ago, I could speak more freely. But we'll just pretend like I'm not going there. But aside from looking like Dodo, she serves her purpose. She's fine. But it would be better if they had cast someone like, what's her nose from The Shining?
Oh, Shelley Duvall.
Shelley Duvall, or someone who, because Shelley Duvall in the late 60s, early 70s, she was this like little starlet, basically, in the movies that I know of that she showed up in that time period. She was just this hot little vixen who would just show up in movies, and this would have been a role for that type, in my opinion, because Jolene, she has a unique look about her and everything. She's supposed to be playing like a racer groupie in this movie. Mm-hmm. I mean, she does well enough. In the role in the movie, it's just, I don't know. Without trying to sound rude, she wouldn't have been my first pick.
Yeah, I think she comes across as mostly flat throughout the movie. She's got a cute energy to her, but yeah, a little bit flat. And she showed up in Spider Baby, playing a really crazy character, and she served much better in that kind of role. I just don't know if she was the right fit for, just kind of I don't know what the word is for that kind of personality.
She had a little bit of a moment when she was upset when Rick wasn't paying her any attention.
Yeah.
That was like her one moment to shine in the movie as an actress, or for that character to shine. But it's just all weird. I mean, like, when Rick is first kind of coming on to her, he's like, hey, why don't we go get a hotel somewhere? And she's just like, yeah, okay, we can do that. Oh, I just gotta call my dad real quick so he doesn't wait up for me. What?
She's like, oh, I need to get some more booze, Kay.
Oh yeah, let's get some more booze. It's like,
hey, I feel like we've all known chicks like that, hang out around.
Yeah, I've known chicks like that, but they don't bring up, let me check in with my dad real quick to ruin the vibe.
Yeah, well, maybe it depends on the age I don't know, but yeah, no, I did think that, that role just doesn't quite feel right. And you could tell that this guy, Rick, again, I don't feel like he really knows how to interact with other human beings properly. And it feels like he only went after her because she was Hawk's girl and he just wanted whatever the top guy had.
Yeah.
And so it's too bad for her.
That's fair.
That's why he starts giving the eyes to Ellen Bernstein later, too. Were you surprised to see her pop up here, or?
I was extremely surprised. And up to that point in the movie, the whole time I was like, why did Caleb choose this? Why did he choose this? And in the back of my mind, I thought maybe it was because of the whole exploitation angle. It's just I wasn't 100% sure if this is an exploitation movie or not. So that I was unsure about that. And so then when she popped in, I thought, oh, maybe this is the reason. Maybe you were going through her filmography or something. And so I thought, oh, okay. And then my next thought was, what is she doing in this movie? But I don't know. Perhaps, I think maybe she wasn't really anybody.
No.
At this point in the 60s.
No, she wasn't. But she got a little bit of the Roger Corman bump, because I'm pretty sure her next film was also a Corman film, or at least someone who worked with Corman a lot. Peter Bogdanovich cast her in The Last Picture Show. And that's kind of credited as her starting her career. So this was just kind of a blip.
Oh, yeah. She was really good in that. But that being said, I can't tell if it's biased or not, but she does seem like the most substantial actor in this movie. But is that biased because we know she is somebody, or is she legitimately the most substantial actor in the movie?
Oh no, she definitely stands out, especially when interacting with her husband, who is not a professional actor, and it's obvious that he's not.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think she gets a better bump just being around weaker actors, but I do think she comes off strong for brief roles here.
Yeah, and seeing her in this movie again, I'm going, what is she doing in this movie? And then my next thought was, I can't believe an actress from one of my all-time favorite movies, Interstellar, is in this movie. That's my next thought. And that's just remarkable on its own. And it's also remarkable that she was, I guess she was 35. She was 37 in 1969, but since this movie was made in 67, she was 35 when this movie was produced. And it's just crazy that she was that old then.
Yeah, wow.
And she's still alive now, because so many people who were even young people, and by young I mean 20s, so many actors who were in their 20s in the 1960s have passed now.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that she was already, well into her mid 30s then, and is still alive and kicking now is a little mind blowing.
Yeah, and it's kind of weird to think that The Exorcist was only about, what was it, like 6 years after this?
Yeah.
It was 72, 73, I think.
I think it's 73.
And she looks quite a bit younger here than she does there. It feels like it's a bigger gap than it really is, but I guess just depends when you catch them.
Yeah, she is. Well, it is 8 years, and 8 years in those days, people would age a lot in 8 years in those days. But in Last Picture Show, like, she totally plays a MILF in that movie. Totally. Like, to me, she's like the more risque version of the mother in The Graduate.
Yeah, I never seen that Last Picture Show. Yeah, I keep meaning to watch it, but never around to it.
Oh man, it is, to me. We did it for Best Picture. I had never seen it until we did it for the podcast. I immediately fell in love with that movie, and it reminds me of if Richard Linklater made one of his movies, but had made it in 1969 or whatever year that movie is. It totally feels like a late 60s Linklater movie.
Oh, that's cool. I gotta check that one out.
I love it.
But yeah, I'm curious where else to go. I'm disappointed you didn't like this one as much, but I did honestly think that there was a fair chance that you wouldn't, because
I was totally into the first third, but once it started getting into the racing and the jockeying for who's better and all that business, like, okay, so I felt like the movie, okay, it felt like whoever was behind the scenes, whether it's the editing, cutting room floor, whatever, it seems like they were really on their game for the first third. And I could just treat it as a serious, relatively low budget, but serious movie. But once it started getting into the jockeying for first and the back and forth and the yada yada yada, I just felt like the competence of putting the movie together just it seemed like it was neither here nor there at that point. And it felt like they were just slapping things together in the editing room. And it just and then it was just.
Do you mean like just in terms of the races or the story, like direction as well?
I'm talking about all together, all around. Like you can really feel when a director or someone is deeply involved with their project, and it felt like they were deeply involved in the first. It's almost as if the filmmaker, director, whoever was most responsible for this movie creatively, it's almost as if they were concentrating on the first third of the movie, and then let's say it was the director, and then he was killed in a tragic accident, and then somebody else had to put together like the last 2/3 of the movie from the footage that they had already shot.
Oh wow!
Weird. It just did not seem like it had the same care and direction to me in the last 2/3. And then it was just weird following the trajectory of especially our lead, really. Like because he seemed to make sense to me at first as our protagonist, as like, okay, he's this drifter, he's just trying to like, you know, make his way, you know, without stepping on anybody's toes unfairly.
Oh, really?
But I mean, it's part of the story though too. But he has this weird changing character where his character gets this weird tunnel vision and obsession with Hawk, which just seems so weird.
Well, Hawk's got the spot that he wants. Hawk's got the ticket to the big leagues.
Yeah, but he seems to lose his quote unquote charming traits. I don't even know if that's the right way to describe it. Or his humble traits. And I get it. This is the purpose of the story. I guess he does this weird character arc, kind of like LaRusso in the Karate Kid movies in general, or in Cobra Kai.
Well, I think that's part of the trick of the movie is I don't think he was ever humble. I mean, from that first race that we see, the reason he catches Willard's eye is he doesn't want to race just for small bets. He wants to race for the pink slips of the fastest car there.
Right.
He's looking for something to enter for racing, I guess, or at least move up in terms of street racing.
You're not wrong, but I guess it's weird to have such an unlikable protagonist.
Oh, that's what I like. Yeah, that he's such a... I mean, by the end, you realize, oh, wow, yeah, this guy never really had any connections with people, and he was this sort of anti-hero, which you wouldn't really expect because you don't... They subtly kind of hide it throughout the movie. But on rewatch, you can see it even more clear. Like, there's that nice old... Every time anyone touches him or tries to be in some way intimate, he immediately rejects them and, like, a wall goes up.
And I like that.
Yeah.
Character trait.
And it makes more sense when you get to the end and see what a cold kind of bastard he actually is. But they do a good job kind of tricking you throughout. Especially once he gets more success and he starts to seem more personable. But really, it's all just kind of pushing until he can get his way further up the ladder until he gets that top spot that he wants. Finally get into the big leagues. Like when he finds it at the end that he kills that guy, he like for a moment has a look of shock and then he just turns away from the rest of them and just kind of seals up again. Willard's like, oh well, we got this other opening and we need a racer. He just looks back at Ellen Bernstein and he's like, okay, I'll take it. It's like, damn.
The death of McCloud is so weird. I mean, I get it, I guess, sort of, but it's still so weird that, he gets in this bad wreck during a race. You can tell he's been shook. He's been rattled. His bell's been rung in his head. But then, he gets out of his car. We don't see him again. And the next thing we hear, oh, he's dead.
Yeah.
What? Okay, well, how did he die? Oh, his neck was broken. He broke his neck. I was like, wait a second. I've seen people break their necks in movie and television before, and it was never like that, where the guy was totally fine. Well, you see, if he would have just stayed in place, but he walked to the ambulance, and that's what got him. What the fuck?
Well, they do say, if in those kind of injuries to just not be moved, just wait till the
I know. And they teach that in first aid classes too. I know, but this is way over the top to see someone who looks like they're just suffering from like a traumatic concussion, but then, oh, nope, died from the broken neck. What?
Hey, it's a risky business. The doctor even told us earlier during that exposition scene.
I know. What the fuck? It was so weird.
But I've seen wrestling matches where it turns out that the wrestler broke his neck in the ring and just got up and kept going because he didn't realize he broke it. So apparently it's a thing that you can do. I don't know.
I know that can happen, but did those wrestlers die?
No, none of them died. But
okay, that's what I'm getting at.
But hey, I don't know. I don't know about that.
Oh my gosh. Okay, and then you can tell by the credits, they produced this movie in association with like a lot of different car clubs, which is cool, I guess. Because that's how you can get all this extra footage of things. I mean, like we get the whole dune buggy scene, which is kind of cool.
I loved it,
and there's good shots and there's good framing of things, but there's just too much of it.
I agree. I don't mind because I love watching that dune buggy scene. I love car movies in general.
What?
And ones on sand I think are very fun. So, I don't know. Maybe you didn't know that, but I'm a big fan of car movies.
No, that's weird. I mean, coming from you, coming out of your mouth, that's weird.
In fact, this was prior to me ever doing my Jack Hill retrospective. I just looked up a list of car movies, and this was on it. And just like my disaster movies of the 70s, I have a giant car movie list that I'm making my way through. That's also why I saw that original The Fast and the Furious as well.
So you should love Death Proof.
Oh, I do like that movie a lot. I think it's a bit weaker than most of Quentin Tarantino's other movies.
It is, but it's still so good, even though it is one of his weaker movies. But shout out to Tubi, because I don't use Tubi often, but whenever I go there, I'm just amazed at their library.
Oh yeah,
it's insane. And so they have this movie. They even have Pitfall from 2013, which has nothing to do with this.
Oh.
And then they have like a whole bunch of other car movies, like I guess of the exploitation era, I suppose. I was wondering if you're going to check out any of those other movies.
Oh, I got the discs. I didn't go on Tubi. I don't know what they got on there.
Oh, they have a bunch. I mean, I don't know how these all fit like into the genre, but there's a whole bunch of car movies. I don't know, Firebird 2015 AD, Speed to Spare.
Yeah, I'm just going to Tubi now.
The Young Savages, I'm not sure if that's a car movie or a biker movie. Double Nickels, Motorcycle Gang, Evil Knievel.
Weird, when I looked up Pit Stop, maybe, yeah, I guess the Canadian one would have different things than you have. Yeah, I didn't see almost any of those.
There's a whole bunch. And I started watching another one. I can't remember what it's called. I can't see it on the screen. I was watching some other car exploitation film from like 73. It had Razor in the title. I can't remember the rest of the title. Oh no, it's called Steel Arena.
Steel Arena. Oh, I think I've heard of that one. Never seen it though. Yeah, another one on my list that I was tempted to break out, but I don't know why I changed my mind was what was it? Dirty Mary, Crazy Larry. You seen that one?
No.
Yeah, not quite exploitation, but a really cool 70s car movie. I guess I was just in a car movie feel at the moment. But yeah, I switched to this one instead.
So, at the end of the day, there's a lot of little things in this movie that are kind of cool, kind of interesting. The cut is like the actual film quality is pretty darn good for most of the version they have on Tubi, so it's really nice to look at. You could actually pick out screen captures individually at places that look really nice in the movie out of context. It's just a weird movie. It just doesn't coalesce for me.
No, I feel like it, for me at least, especially on my second viewing, I feel like it comes together quite well.
And the only character who I guess kind of seems consistent, even though he has his turn in character, but his makes more sense than Rick's, and that is Hawk. He's the most oddball character in the movie, yet he's the only one that kind of stays consistent to himself.
Again, I think Rick is consistent. I just think that they kind of trick you.
Okay, fine, they tricked us. I mean, they masked his darker elements.
Yeah, I think that's what's. Even though I don't think this lead actor, I don't think he's necessarily a great actor, but he's got a great steely look to him, and his face itself almost feels like a mask at times.
Oh yeah, he's almost like an evil Iceman, Val Kilmer.
I didn't think about that.
Dark version, the mirror universe, dark version of Val Kilmer's Iceman.
And he's good looking, and that kind of, I think, like attracts people to him. But there's something in his eyes that just has this like he's almost looking through people, which I feel like they again do a good job kind of keeping hidden from you until you get to the end when he turns around and looks almost right into the camera and looks away from all these grieving people. And yeah, I feel like that's when his true coldness starts to settle over more.
Oh, and something else I started talking about how they got involvement at like different car clubs, and how on the one hand that's nice because they get to get some real authentic footage, although like I said, it's sloppily edited in because there's too much of it. There's an excess, so it almost backfires that they worked alongside these other groups. And then there's the really odd one when they're in the like the car fabricating place, like kind of like their workshop place.
Oh yeah.
And there's this weird scene where it cuts to Mr. Willard, and he's like talking to like a technician, air quotes or something. And he's like, "Well, you see here with the down scoop on the trail lid and da-da-da." And they're like, "Mr. Willard, you got a phone call?" And he's just like, "Oh, hold on." But you know, it was weird because that guy was the guy who was explaining the photo or picture. I'm assuming he's like a real guy who really works there. And I was like imagining the setup. Okay, so you just go ahead and start explaining this thing. And then we're gonna, you know, transition to this other part, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It has a weird, funny feel to it. It almost reminds me of, I don't know if you've ever seen, you probably have the like Wonderful World of Disney, like documentaries from like the 50s and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's weirdly like that.
Yeah, and I think kind of the reverse of that is that old man who gives Rick some tips, I should say, not ticks, tips for racing. That old man, I got the sense that wasn't an actor, that was just maybe like a real racer.
Yeah.
But he had such instead of feeling like he was just coming off, you know, doing a rehearsed line that he couldn't act, that old man had such like a natural feel to him. And I like that. I thought that worked. I thought he was a charming kind of grandpa presence.
Yeah, and again, anyone who wants to see that done to its absolute best, that method, just watch Linklater's Bernie movie. Of intermixing everyday folks with actual actors is what I'm talking about.
Which movie?
Bernie.
Oh, okay, Bernie. I thought you said Burning movie. I was like, Burning movie. I don't know if I heard of that one.
No, yeah, Bernie. Yeah, I actually saw a clip that was taken out of the movie Bernie. I actually saw it on TikTok recently, and then people were like, respond because the clip is, you know, out of context. And people were responding like, I can't even tell, is this a movie or is that an actual guy who's talking? And it was because it was an actual guy who's in the movie. And so it just like confused the hell out of people on TikTok.
That's interesting. But yeah, I don't know if I have much more. I was curious if you were gonna like this one. I had a feeling that, or at least I thought there was a chance that you wouldn't. But
To be fair to you, when it comes to me, you can't always predict.
yeah,
Because I know Sean gets surprised when we do Best Picture when I go really negative on something he thought I was going to enjoy, or the opposite. Like he thought I was going to hate such and such, and it turns out I like it. And so I'll grant you that. And even I didn't know what I was going to think. But yeah. I will say, though, I always thought the first two movies that were ever done on the ProgNeg feed would be the weirdest. But I don't think that's true anymore.
yeah. It makes me more nervous for my list because I got a lot of weird ones on there. Ones that I really like. But
I'll watch it, whatever it is.
yeah, including Spider Baby, by the way, or The Maddest Story Ever Told. That's on there. And I love that flick, but I'm curious. I've been curious to introduce it to anyone because I don't know how well it'd be received. But
I can't remember who coined the joke within Doctor Who podcast. I feel like it was someone adjacent to Tara's Tavern, but it was the old like. And I'm reframing it right now the way I'm going to state it. This is not the way it was originally said, but it's weird that if you were at home watching something alone and a family member or significant other walked in on you, would you rather like that person walk in on you just watching pornography by yourself or watching something like The Curse of Peladon? Like, what would be more embarrassing or more difficult to explain? Especially if Alpha Centauri was in the scene.
exactly, the giant penis looking one.
So it's a weird toss-up. It's a weird Sophie's choice of which one you'd rather get caught watching with your pants down.
Oh. Yeah, and are you saying you throw this movie on there? I don't understand the connection here. What's this?
It's no, it's not as bad as those examples, but it is weird. It is weird.
That's interesting, huh? I'm surprised because maybe it's just I've been watching a lot of this stuff lately.
But look, I mean, I watched Billy Jack and I don't particularly like those movies, but there are things to take out of them for sure.
Yeah, and you mentioned it earlier about you weren't sure if this was exploitation or not.
Right, because
I think this was. Yeah, I think it was riding the wave of 60s car exploitation, which, yeah, it feels a little bit distant from the later exploitation stuff, especially for Jack Hill, who would really learn to lean into the sex and violence. This one's much more tame in that regard, but
yeah, because this term exploitation in film, it's a really confusing one to me because I don't know exactly where you draw the lines of the genre or the definition. Because on the one hand, like blaxploitation, like I usually know it when I see it, like right away. And what are the other types of popular specific exploitation besides? Well, there's sexploitation,
yeah,
which again, those are usually pretty obvious right off the bat. And like you said, to just draw more on sex and violence, yeah, okay, get that. And then I don't know what you call like the fantasy type of exploitation movies, but I'm really familiar with those too. So those I get. But like this one, the reason I was kind of like unsure about it, because first of all, I wasn't sure if there was a specific car version, but of course, why wouldn't there be? I know there's like what are essentially biker exploitation movies. I know those exist, so why not with cars? But the other reason why it gets a little unclear to me is because the movies that are labeled exploitation, I mean, it's usually mainly the decade of the 70s and maybe the early 80s as well. Wow. But see, at the beginning of this movie, again, especially the first third, it doesn't feel particularly exploitative as much as it just seems low budget and And the other way I would explain these types of movies that come across as low budget, because like I said, exploitation seems to mainly be around the 70s and a little bit prior and a little bit post 70s.
Mm-hmm.
But low budget type of movies have always existed, or B movies, whatever.
Yeah.
They've kind of always existed, even since the silent era, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And then to this day, in modern times, it's kind of like some of this stuff is like what I would. A lot of these low budget movies almost seem like the equivalent of our video on demand or direct to video in modern times, or like the movies that go straight to streaming. And and like I can understand it, even though I wasn't alive and going to the movies in the 60s and the 50s and whatnot. But I understand, as like an amateur movie historian, the idea of double features and just getting people into the theater, just it's something, you could just, kind of sell anything. I and especially when people had less alternatives for media, you could kind of tolerate like a throwaway movie more, I suppose, if you wanted to. And so that's why my point is these kind of weird low budget amateurish rushed films kind of exist in every decade. So I'm not always sure if they're quote unquote exploitation or not.
Yeah, and it is more specific to the mid 60s to the, I would say, late 70s. Some people lump in the late or the early 80s. I don't know. I tend to think the 80s stuff drifts away because one of the main drivers of exploitation, one of the reasons that the term became popular, had to do with the drive-in theaters, where they would be putting out these exploitation films that weren't necessarily, not all of them were like sex or violence focused, but they were niche focused in order to drive people to come see these double bills. So we'd have a double bill of 2 car films, car exploitation. They don't have to be super violent, but usually there's a bit of a darker edge because they're more low budget. So they're trying to sell the fact that they can be a little bit more darker edge than just a mainstream studio picture. So that's where the exploitation comes from. It comes from exploiting a trend or a niche. And later on it did become more focused on violence, but in the 60s they couldn't quite get away with that. So we have a more tamer version here.
Well, I don't know. There were some violent movies by the end of the 60s.
Yes.
Whether they're exploitation or not, there was some violent movies.
Yeah.
So yeah. We got to rate it.
Or were you looking for unit measure?
Yes, please.
Oh, geez. How many dead racers? No, that's terrible.
And I will say their goggles that the drivers are wearing, they almost look like scuba gear goggles.
They do, yeah. And I love the back projection. Especially Sid Haig pretend to drive and just
he's insane.
I love it.
Like he's almost like a live action version of that classic Disney cartoon, the one where they're driving the RV and everything's crazy. And
I don't know.
Yeah, it's like I don't know. What do they call it? It's one of the iconic Disney shorts of like the 40s or something. It probably has the word caravan or holiday in the title or something. But Sid Haig is like a live action Goofy, like trying to drive a car, like on a mountain road that has no guardrail. He's out of control. He's actually pretty entertaining, I have to say. And also when he's like dancing in the club as well.
Oh yeah,
he's just nuts.
And he's got such a distinct look to him. Like he's got this hugely, I'm assuming it's like acne scars, his face.
Yeah. Think Edward James Olmos. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and we'll see him again relatively soon whenever we check out THX 1138. He shows up very briefly in that and has a bit of a stand-up moment.
And by the way, was this filmed, I'm assuming, Southern California?
I'm most of Jack Hill's movies were shot there, so I'm assuming this was as well.
God, it's just, I don't know what it is with the 60s. Everything looks so damn clean. And like everything, like the town looks nice in this movie. It's for whatever part of Southern California is definitely deserty as all hell. It looks dusty as heck, but it looks clean. Like the buildings and the streets and everything.
Yeah. Oh god, I was watching this other Roger Corman movie the other day called It's a Bikini World. It also took place in Southern California, and everything was so polished and everything popped so much. It was a color movie, so they were definitely pumping that up. And I was like, man, it looked like such a sparkly time, the '60s. But
I'll tell you, I could just sit down and watch Once Upon a Time in Hollywood right now. It's such an amazing movie. It's such an amazing movie.
oh, but I was just about to say, I forgot to mention with the exploitation classification. Yeah, I always think of it as very time specific, because I feel like it's one of those movements in films instead of like a genre. I feel like people think of it as a genre, but it's not. It's kind of comparable to like something like the French New Wave. Like you could make a movie now that kind of captured all the elements of French New Wave, but it'd never really be a French New Wave movie. Just like there's modern movies that they kind of call exploitation, something like the stupid Machete movies I hear people call exploitation. But exploitation really only existed in that very particular time, that movement.
Well, those do seem like modern exploitation movies, I gotta say. The Machete ones in particular.
Yeah, but they're clearly like reference pieces. They weren't movies produced in that time period, so they're not a part of that movement.
Well, they obviously weren't produced in that time period, but they still feel pretty true. Like it seems like the same kind of thought process went into the filmmaking of those movies as did these movies that did come out in the right era. Like in other words, it's not Machete to me. It's not that Machete is like, hey, let's make a movie like those exploitation movies. No, let's just take the same mindset and do it now. I don't know. Does the distinction make sense?
I think they are. I mean, Robert Rodriguez did make Grindhouse, which is an intentional reference piece. I think Machete was just an
yes,
extension.
it is. But okay, how can I explain this? Let's pretend we have like some type of dinosaur species, a brontosaurus, and a brontosaurus in its era would just do whatever a brontosaurus does because it has a brontosaurus brain, and so it acts as it acts because that's how a brontosaurus would act. In modern times, I could try to make like a synthetic or artificial brontosaurus that mimicked a real brontosaurus and like program it to act the same way, respond the same way. So that would be like like literally a recreation.
Mm-hmm.
But if we could somehow teleport a brontosaurus brain or something and then have that actual creature be alive today, it would still have that thought process.
This is a weird analogy.
Preserved and intact. It would just be acting as if out of its time. But it's not pretending to be a brontosaurus. It's not masquerading as a brontosaurus. It's just literally the same brontosaurus thinking versus a recreation. And I know that Planet Terror is supposed to be like a throwback to that time.
Yeah.
But because Robert Rodriguez has made so many movies in that vein, I feel like, and just getting a little flavor from some of the special features of some of those movies, I think Robert Rodriguez just put himself in that same type of headspace. More than just, I want to capture it. He's just thinking like them with those movies and some of his others.
Yeah. But it could never be truly part of the exploitation movement, which is why the label gets put.
But it's weird though, because the time period of the exploitation era, it lines up with the same exact time period of what was called the American New Wave or New Hollywood, whatever you want to label it. They happened in the exact same time frame.
Yeah.
What's the bigger connection there? And American New Wave and the exploitation films are all relatively low budget, gritty, very analog feel, shot on location. So it's weird how they share, like the Venn diagrams share so much, yet they still kind of differ so much at the end of the day. I don't know. What's that all about? I'm sure books have been written on this.
I mean, I tend to think of it as most of those movies were released by major studios, where most of the exploitation films were released by low-budget studios like American International
Well,
Pictures.
they were released by studios that we've heard of, but they were also a lot of times those studios acquired the the distribution rights. You know what I mean?
Yep, absolutely.
So I guess you could say they're aggregated. I suppose is out of the pool. I don't know.
But I think that is the difference. Yeah, I think it's the studios.
Well, there's definitely a difference. It's just, but it's like they exist side by side each other.
And also, like I mentioned with the drive-in theaters, that was really where exploitation lived and came from. So most of those new Hollywood movies wouldn't have been sitting in there with double bills like that. So I think that maybe that's why they had two different audiences or two different separate movements. But unit of measure, I'm not too sure. I mean, we could go with just 198s, or no, I guess this isn't the TARDIS Tavern style.
No, that's too confusing for me.
Or just car crashes. How many car crashes out of 5?
Okay,
Considering that insane derby. I wonder if those derbies still exist, by the way. I can't imagine.
Which type?
That figure 8 style.
Oh, I don't know about the figure 8, but take out the figure 8 and all that other stuff definitely still exists.
Yeah, because that just seems insane. And Jack Hill did say that he was thinking, because he was a fan of European films. He was like, I wanted to kind of preserve this so that people someday could look at it and be like, look at what these wacky Americans were doing. It's one of the craziest pieces of Americana, he said.
It just reminds me of a particular course from Mario Kart that crosses over the middle. But car crashes, that seems like so lame, but I'll go with it.
Hey, if you got something else, I'll take it.
No, it's okay. We'll just go with it. This will probably be my lowest rated movie on this podcast feed. At a shining 1.5 stars.
Glowing.
I didn't realize that Jack Hill was somebody. I didn't realize anybody in this movie was anybody except for Ellen Burstyn until I started doing a little bit of research. I had no idea that anybody was anybody in this. But when I went in to log in my review on Letterboxd, I thought I was going to see like a dumpster fire of reviews. No, en contraire. This movie scored by users of Letterboxd, the most common rating is 4 stars. The next most common is 3.5 stars, and then 3. And so this is a well-received movie on the Letterboxd app. People really like this movie. Let me just so you get like so the listener can get like a different viewpoint. Let me just look at like the first 2 here real quick. This person, Silent Dawn, gave it 4.5.
Oh wow!
Stock car mayhem, full of earthly beauty. Sid Haig shines in a role that is so emotive, by turns hysterical and painful. He could turn any supporting performance into the shining star of the picture. But Brian Donlevy and Richard Davalos are just as memorable, and Pit Stop as a whole, alternatively known as The Winner, is a poetic glimpse into the hardened economy of figure 8 racing. It's almost impossible to avert your eyes from the rough energy of this Jack Hill classic. Holy shit.
Yeah, we didn't mention that, but I did really appreciate getting this kind of little peephole into the kind of exploitation itself of these racers by this guy who...
Yes, that is true.
...owns the stake in the course and doesn't give a fuck about their lives at all.
Very true. Very true. Yeah, almost like their horses bred for racing. Yeah, 89 people like that review. Here's one by Matt Lynch. He gave it 5 stars. Totally immersed in its subculture, obsessed with the zen allure of professionally blowing off steam. Hawk's respect for a man's trade meets the grimy high-contrast urgency and occasional butch feminism of an early Russ Meyer movie, with figure 8 demo derbies instead of sex scenes. Rubbin' is racing. Holy shit, man. People love this movie. It's crazy. So I obviously missed the boat.
And I really like this movie. Yeah, I was going to give it a 3.5. I think it's definitely not very polished. There's a lot of, I'd say, directional issues, but I feel like it is more editing.
It's editing.
Especially when it comes to the leaving in so much time with those racing scenes. And again, if it is a piece of car exploitation, that's the selling point. People are there to see these stunts. So I can forgive it for that, but I do like this kind of dark anti-hero character. I think that's unusual. And I know Roger Corman himself was kind of like I'm not 100% sure about that, but it ended up working out for them. So I can appreciate that. And I also think the movie looks great otherwise. I think the black and white just complements it very well. If it was a color movie, I feel like a lot of the kind of gritty element of it would be a little bit stripped away.
So, whew, there you have it. An interesting selection.
Yeah, and I might break out another Jack Hill. I'm not 100% sure about Spider Baby after this discussion. Maybe I'll save that one for another day. But maybe Switchblade Sisters. I think that's a great one. But maybe not. I don't know. We'll see with you.
I don't know. And I have no idea what's going to be on next time on the podcast. Because I never know where we are exactly with selecting new movies. But there you have it. Whew, I don't even know what to say anymore. Other than, this is Eric.
And this is Caleb.
And until next time,
the balcony is yours.
Prognosis negative.
I'm telling you, man, I was shocked when I went to Letterboxd. Like, man, I completely missed the train on this one.
Yeah, I'm not too surprised. I think it's probably the people who search it out to rate it are probably Jack Hill fans. And so they're going to come in with appreciating seeing what he's doing with a different type of movie. That's what I would think.